Hello and welcome to another one of my mixed media videos. This is my latest piece that I have finished. The first thing was the photograph. I took the photograph over the River Fal in Cornwall and the original photograph had these two herons quite a long way apart. So in Photoshop I removed a slice of sky and put them a bit closer together. There is a little video tutorial on how I did that on my channel. Then I printed the photograph out onto tissue paper. The reason I do that is because it picks up all the texture of whatever's on the canvas underneath. With this one I kept the actual texture level very low. I painted the background a nice warm colour to come through the tissue paper as well, so I can alter the final effect on the painting. I created the border out of pieces of card, various widths and depths, which I've glued on and then painted using different colours, paints, inks, stencils to get like a faux leather, faux wood type of effect on there. I hope you enjoy the video tutorial. I hope it's of use to you. If you like it, give me the old thumbs up, and if you want to see more, press the old subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching. So here we go, let's get started on it, shall we? Initially I was going to put some corrugated card, it was craft card, to make like a landscape effect in the background. But I was very disappointed with this craft card because as soon as I started putting paint or ink on it, it disintegrated, it just fell apart. So it didn't appear in the final picture at all. Here I'm just working out my layout. I've die cut all the letters ready. For my title, The Herons in Flight. I did double layer them because I wanted them to stand proud of the canvas panel that's underneath. The canvas panel has a layer of tissue paper stuck over it already. I wasn't bothered about putting extra crumples in, but it just adds that little bit of extra texture. I'm just measuring where my herons will go, because I don't want my title to hide them at all. I want them to be separate. So I'm just having a look to decide on the layout there. So here we go, just very quickly putting in my letters. It's amazing how fast you can go if you really try hard, isn't it? Yeah, I was a bit worried about making a spelling mistake at this point, so I kept checking three very simple words. Can't even count to three now. And kept double checking with my picture to make sure they weren't going to have any conflict there. I wanted a distinct space between my herons and my lettering. That was important to me at this point. So now I'm just going to take away that craft card. At this point I was still planning on keeping the craft card. I hadn't started painting on it, so I didn't realise what was going to happen to it. I'm just going to use a ruler to make sure my lettering is straight, and then I move it around a little bit to try and balance it out across the canvas. Because I'm using a lot of spare letters here that I've cut out from other projects, that's why there's different colours and different cards in there. When they're all painted and covered in tissue, it won't make any difference at all what they are cut out of. So I'm just trying to get my placing right. I couldn't quite get it 100% level across the canvas, because the word herons has got quite a few fat letters in it, so it did need a little bit more space, but I tried my best there. Having spent quite a long time placing my letters, when I was gluing them down I knew I'd be moving them around, so to make sure I got them in exactly the right place, I spritzed the canvas with a very pale blue spray, just made out of, I think it's acrylic and water, to dilute it down. And then when I was gluing, once that dry, I knew that my letters would go into exactly the right place on the canvas. To get rid of the hard edge on that blue, I used a baby wipe just to blend it in a bit. Now I can see exactly where my letters are going to go, and I can start gluing them in. So with PVA, yeah, the sun's a bit bright through the window behind me there, it's causing some problems. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing there. There's my PVA bottle. It's a trusty hair dye bottle. It's got a very fine nib. It's a brilliant gadget. So putting the glue exactly where I want the letters to go, and then the letters will go on. So there we go, I'm putting the glue on, layering my letters on, and then once I've done the first layer of letters, making sure they're stuck down firmly, I'm going to go around with my PVA again and stick down the second layer of letters so they stand proud. These letters are as much part of the design as the photograph. I'm going to just using tweezers to get them all lined up nice and neatly. And once this is done, once I've got all these down, we just left it to dry, probably overnight. Now the glue's dry, I'm using primary blue acrylic paint mixed with white and some gel medium to get some depth of colour in the background. I wanted the herons to stay white, the wording to stay plain, paler. So I used my brayer to put some white over the top. Now I'm just blending in the white that hit the canvas. There is a photograph going over the top of this, so it doesn't have to be perfect. This is the beauty of using the photograph on tissue paper technique. The canvas underneath adds texture, it adds interest. But it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, the more blemishes there are, in some ways the better, because it does add that extra layer of interest. So now I'm ready to attach my photograph. I'm using gel medium, just putting a layer of gel medium on there. I've got some white paint on my brush, but never mind. It'll just blend in to the background. Just shows how well I clean my brushes between projects, doesn't it, really? Putting a lot of gel medium down, trying to get a nice even covering. Now I'm just going to lay my tissue paper down. Really only get one go at this. If it goes in the wrong place, it's a case of tough, really. And now I'm using a dry paper towel to blot it down. You can see some of the paint is coming through that tissue paper. So keep turning the paper towel round to protect the photograph as it comes through. And once it's down, we'll go around the edges with extra gel medium to make sure those edges are stuck down properly. The tissue paper is slightly smaller than the canvas. Originally I didn't think that mattered because I was going to put on that corrugated card edging, but I'm going to hide the edges with something else anyway. Just making sure all those edges are really firmly stuck down with gel medium. And because I don't want any of those harsh straight lines coming through where the tissue is, I'm going to add some extra layers of tissue as well, especially over that lettering, because that lettering needs to be firm. I'm using a mop brush here to get the tissue in all the crevices into the lettering and make sure all the edges are stuck down as well. Using the mop brush helps produce extra texture as well. It gently ripples the tissue paper from underneath. Ripping the tissue so I don't get those harsh straight lines, and I'm using it a bit like a bandage. I'm just going to layer it on over my lettering to make sure that lettering is well covered. Lots of gel medium, top and bottom, to make sure it sticks down. A bit like papier-mâché as well, I suppose. I want all of that lettering really well covered with tissue paper. I'm using that mop brush to get that tissue paper into all the nooks and crannies of the lettering. So, the tissue is now laid all the way over the lettering. It's fairly well glued down all around the edges, and I'll leave it to dry. That was me just looking at the corrugated card and discarding it. I'm using a mixture of copper paint and gel medium now, and a makeup sponge dabber to put my paint over the lettering. The sponge dabber wasn't as easy as I was hoping. It has got a very fine point on it, but I couldn't see, so I tried with my finger, as you can see there. And then I decided to go old school and I used a paintbrush. At this point with the paintbrush I did 2 or 3 layers of the copper mixture. As it was drying it was soaking into the tissue a little bit, so it just needed an extra layer to get an even coating of the colour over the lettering. And there you go, I'm just finishing off the final touching up of the copper paint. Now I've decided to make a different kind of edge for my canvas. So I'm slicing some brown card into 2 and 1 centimetre strips that I'll use to make a border on my canvas. So here we go. I've just put layers of those strips of card using PVA onto the canvas just around the outside. I'm building it up so there's 3 or 4 layers of card going around the canvas to give it a nice frame. Then the aim is to give it a faux wood leather type effect once it's all dry. It's very sticky at this point, there's glue squidging everywhere, so once I've got it all around, I'm not going to bother kneading off the edges yet. I'll just leave it to dry until it's well and truly dry. Just adding extra strips all the way round until I've got the height that I wanted. So once the glue's dry, it's time to go in and start painting. I'm using a mixture of black and white acrylic paint, a little bit of medium mixed in there, and I'm just bobbing it around the edge on that framework, just keeping it really loose. I want some smears, I don't want an even coating at all. I don't even mind if some of the brown shows through. It all adds extra depth to the colour. So going all the way around, make sure I've got those edges covered. Being very careful, trying not to get any on the picture. I think I did in the end, I just had to clean it off. And that's it when it's all painted all the way around with that black and white. Now I'm going to add some extra colour. I've got a bit of cadmium red in there and a little bit of black. And I'm starting to build up the colour on the frame. I'll be adding lots of different colours. There'll be some burnt umber in there as well. It won't be a smooth coat. I wanted to kind of get an old, distressed feel to this frame. So I now use a bit of common sense and get a piece of scrap paper to protect my picture, because I want to get the inside of the card that you can see when you're looking at the picture from different angles. That needs some paint and colour on it as well. So I'm using a little sponge dabber with my assortments of paints and just making sure there's no edges of the hard edges of the card showing, because it would rather spoil the illusion that I've got this old metallic wooden frame going on around the picture. So I just do that all the way around the outside. It's useful to look at your picture from different angles at this point to make sure you've not missed anything. When you're looking at it the same way up all the time, you can turn it around and think, oh, I've missed a whole section there. So I keep turning it round to have a look to make sure there's nothing glaringly gone wrong. And we're getting near the end now, so I'm going in with my copper stamping paint. It's a texture paint. It's very heavy duty because it is designed for stenciling, so it's got a little bit more body to it than the other paints I've got. Putting it on with a sponge dabber, being careful not to get any on my picture. And it gives that lovely final glossy metallic finish to my picture frame. Now I've trimmed off the edges of the card on the frame, and I'm looking at the frame and the balance of the colouring in the picture, and I feel that blue is a bit too overpowering. The rest of the picture is quite distressed and aged looking, but the blue is very vibrant, so I want to tone it down. I'm going to go for an ultramarine. The primary blue is that very vibrant, and some black and some white to give it a grey colour. The white will act as like a chalky, opaque finish to it, so we'll get rid of some of that vibrancy from the... If I just had the blue and the white, I would get a very vibrant colour. The black will grey it down, tone it down, and the white adds that little bit of opaqueness, sort of a misty finish if you like to it. So I'm just making sure I've got the right quantity of black. That black is a very powerful black. A little bit of that black goes an awful long way. And I'm just mixing the colour that I want in on the palette there. So once my paint's all mixed up to the colour I like, I'm putting it on my canvas. I'm using the abstract paints. They're really good. They're in little pouches and they're very buttery and they're lovely to work with. But it's quite opaque. When I'm using some of the other cheaper brands mostly, they're less opaque. So none of my blue's coming through, which I was hoping it would have lit. I wanted a touch of that blue to shine through. So I'm going to use a baby wipe just to dilute that paint down that's there and lift some back off the canvas. And I actually diluted the paint down on the palette with some gel medium, just to loosen it up a bit so that it wasn't quite so opaque, because I did want a hint of that blue to shine through. Once I've done that, I'm now going in with a very, very fine brush to go in around my herons, just making sure the paint blends in. And I'm being very careful with my brush strokes here. I'm trying to keep them horizontal and vertical, because I wanted to try and get the effect of the canvas, the waft and the weave that I had with the tissue paper. So when I've gone round the heron, I'll go back in and I go horizontally and vertically with my paintbrush to get that effect of canvas underneath the paint. Once the blue had all dried, I've got my copper stenciling paint back out and just touched up my lettering that had got splashed with paint in a couple of places. So just using a very small brush and my finger, going in and neatening up the letters. Once everything's finished off, I'm putting a layer of Mod Podge over the whole lot to add a nice even layer of luster. It's a luster finish one, so it'll give it a nice glossy finish and it'll help hold everything down as well. It'll add an extra layer of protection to the piece. So nicely, gently, with a nice big soft brush, going in with the Mod Podge. Once the first layer was dry, I gave it a second layer as well to make sure I hadn't missed any little gaps on my painting. Now then, one of the things I noticed when I was looking at my picture up close and turning it from side to side was the edges needed just a finishing touch. So here I'm getting some black acrylic craft paint out, and I'm just going to run a line of black paint all the way around the edge of my picture, just as a finishing touch, so it looks good from any angle really. So just with a brush and just giving that final finishing touch to the painting, and then it's all done and dusted, ready for signing and putting up. And here are some final photographs for you. I've tilted it to the light so you can see how it glistens and it catches the light, and you can see all the extra texture in there. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.